I have a share, and it's actually up on KosherTube. Okay, if you look at my stuff on KosherTube, you can see my series on sneas. Okay? Okay? And the way I define sneas, the way most people define sneas is almost like it's not being sexual. The way I define sneas is proper sexuality. It's not the absence of sexuality, it's proper sexuality. And I opened up, I remember one of the times I presented my Sharon Sneas to a group of women, I opened up by saying to this group of women, I says, so what do you guys think of the burqa?
What?
Burqa. The burqa. Sneas stick? The sneas stick? And this woman who was finally dressed said, yeah, it's sneas stick. Says, well, what do you think? So it's really sneas stick. I mean, you know, so why don't you wear a burqa then? So, well, I'm not on that level. Or then you have these crazy women in Eretz Yisrael who started wearing burqas and jihadis and whatever. So, and there was a case where one place this woman got a few women doing this and so forth and so forth, and this woman was always walking around was wearing, you know, to be really sneastic, and her husband said, stop this already. She didn't want to listen to her husband, I want to be sneastic. So the husband basically took her to Besdin, and the Besdin said, listen to your husband. No, I want to be sneastic. So the Besdin called over the husband and said, listen, give her a get. I mean, like, this is crazy. The fact of the matter is what it's saying. No, the truth of the matter is wearing a burqa is a sneastic or what's sneas? Right. If sneas is not knowing, not avoiding anything sexual, and I guess it is, but the fact of the matter is the reason burqas aren't really sneastic is because sneas, if you really look at the concept of sneas, it's much more beyond that. It's actually proper sexuality. When you talk about shidduch dates, if you talk about a setting where you have singles events, there's got to be proper sexuality because part of the singles event is to encourage a certain level of attraction that doesn't take you into a level where it's ulcer. The point is, so how do you work with that? Now that's a much more difficult situation, and that's why some of these answers miss the whole point. The fact of the matter is that there is supposed to be a certain level of proper sexuality within the Jewish world, and the fact is that you know, the point is that's something that has to be presented. But the point is, if you give black and white answers, you're missing the point.
Right, like elbows aren't sexy and like.
No, that's. You know something. The fact is that I'm not getting into details. The fact is that we're obviously talking about something. The fact is, I want to go back to Yoshua Bear's statement. The male-female relationship is a much more complex relationship. The truth is, when you start talking about the difference between men and women, the complexity of that distinction can't be answered by simplistic answers. Right. You can't just sit there and say, all women can't be leaders. Well, the point is that, you know, three of the judges in the United States Supreme Court are women. Okay.
Yeah, but they're all crony.
What the fact is that if you then don't worry, they're pretty smart women. So the point is that you can't then you have to deal with, you can't simply dismiss and say women can't be judges al pi halacha because they don't have judicial. What?
There were judges even in ancient Israel, like Dvorah.
Dvorah is the one question. The fact of the matter is women can't be judges. So the question is how did Dvorah then become a shofet? So there's a lot of answers to explain why she was in that position, but generally women shouldn't be judges. So the point is, the simple answer given is because you can't really work through judicial ideas. Okay, so Ruth Ginsburg is a question. How do you deal with Ruth Ginsburg? one of the Supreme Court justices, right? In the Chamalibowitz, if you want to forget about actual judges, you can talk about a smart woman in the Chamalibowitz. So the point is that you have to deal with real issues, and then you want to deal with real Madame Curie. I mean, the fact is that you can't give. A lot of times you give these simplistic answers. A lot of times, is there any issue? Yes. If you're going to be around people who basically they're going to come to the shir because their real interest is to try and flirt with every person there, and so that's exactly it. If your objective is really this will be a justification for flirting and so forth and so forth.
Ending the show crisis.
Okay, the fact is, wait a second. That doesn't end the shit of crisis. That creates a new crisis. The point is that the fact is, wait a second. Let's not. Excuse me. Let's not take this into a level of okay. The point is that if you're dealing with this, you have to deal with it with a real perspective and say, okay, so what's the point of this year? And then why is it developed this way? And then you understand a more complex thing. Then as you understand with greater complexity the situation, then you find out, well, simplistic answers don't work. Okay? And sometimes these things are really work. People talk about mechitzas at weddings, right? Okay. There's a rub.
Separate seating too.
Separate seating, right? There's a rub. There are people. There's a rub in Eretz Yisrael who's very adamant about how weddings need to be mixed, because where else are people going to meet each other? And the Rav Aaron Soloveitchik was asked where did he meet his wife. It's at a wedding. Okay. So
on the women's side.
No. At a wedding. Where else? That's where you
The women's side has all the best food.
But the fact is,
that's so true.
But the fact is, excuse me. Okay. The fact is that the point is that you want to. There's a reason for this, and a wedding is a proper place where if the people who come to the wedding are carrying themselves with from a firm perspective and so forth, it's a proper place for people to meet. Okay, so hey, the point is that demands a more complex understanding of life. So when I ask that question about living with questions, the fact is I just gave a shiur. It's actually it's also in kosher too, but I gave a shiur talking, and we talked about women in Judaism. We talked about women rabbis and stuff like that. And my wife commented to me, because I've done a lot of work in women in Judaism. If you go to our website, nishma.org, you'll see some of the stuff that I've done on women in Judaism. But I went through a much more thorough approach. So they started with the first mitzvah of puravu. Why is there a distinction in the mitzvah of puravu between men and women? Because men are obligated, women aren't obligated in the mitzvah. So how does that make sense? And I also showed that most of the answers given really don't hold water. And then I go into the issue of milah. Okay, the concept that men and women obviously have the distinction in the mitzvah of the milah. So the point is why don't women have something that needs to be perfected in order to be mashlim themselves? Okay, that's because you read the Chida, it's very important for men to complete themselves through milah and removing the oral. So why don't women have that? So these are all questions that when you really deal with the subject in greater depth, it's fuller questions. Anyways, so I've done a lot of work on women in Judaism. So my wife came over who attended that shiur, and she came over to me and says, "You didn't deal with any of your psychological stuff, of trying to define the difference in the psychology of men and women." And I said, "Yeah, because as much as I had to try and find what is the reason there's a halachic difference between men and women, it must touch upon something psychologically. I haven't been able to work it out." Now the truth is the world hasn't been able to work it out. When the women's liberation movement began, right? Women's liberation movement, it was like anything a man could do, a woman could do, and there's no difference between men and women except for a few body parts. Now there's a whole argument of the difference between the psychology of males and females, and to the extent that you have quote unquote transgender, where it's not about the body parts, but what's in your mind, and feminine and male. That's good. But even beyond that, you have that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, which says a distinction. The point is that, so what's that distinction? And what usually you find is that there's a distinction, but trying to really work out what that distinction is really, really difficult. Somehow the halacha gives you some insight into this by making distinctions, but distinctions have to be clearly defined, and they can't be misconstrued to support simplistic answers, which is what I find happens. But that means you have to live with the question. So I understand the tension of the situation, the tension of halacha in terms of men and women, and I understand I don't have answers. But the point is that the fact is I see the questions and so forth, and you see how much more complex the questions really are, and that really is what comes out when you really analyze things. You really start to see some aspects of the greater complexity of the ideals, and you're trying to work out what really is right, what really is wrong, and you begin to understand that some of the things which are so easily poo-pah'd as bad are not so necessarily bad. Like your point about sexuality is very real. A lot of people just basically want to answer the question by sort of saying sex bad, right? The fact of the matter is, from a halachic perspective,
and like in Judaism, you can grow up with it, like feeling like, oh, it's like to be afraid of it, or like, you know, cause it.
Or it's the biggest thing that's ever happened.
Disengage or whatever.
Yeah, but the point is that. But on the other hand, if you want to be a person who follows the halacha, you have to understand the constructs and so forth. But it's not a construct that basically defines it as I mean, that's much more of a Catholic aspect. That celibacy is the ideal. We don't believe that.
For instance, like at a wedding, for example, like if it's like a religious wedding, you're not really that comfortable like intermingling with girls and guys. There's a feeling because you're a religious Jew or whatever. But at a not such religious wedding, it's so much more easier.
And the fact
makes it much more.
But the fact is that then it gets into an issue where it's much more comfortable in a non-frum environment. But the fact is, part of it, but part of that reason is because there are no or less parameters. The point is what is the right comfort. In other words, it's true that there's certain aspects of a non-orthodox environment that has dropped certain standards. Okay, so therefore, but that allows for greater flexibility in relating. The point is therefore Orthodoxy responds by saying we're going to maintain these standards. The point is how do you say I want to still have a certain level of what I consider to be proper, halakhically proper, while incorporating into this that which brings about this certain sense of greater of familiarity.
I don't know if that happens. Is that actually?
Yeah, the fact is that
more black and white.
But the fact is that that's the objective. You can do that. That's part of what I said when I spoke about that issue with helping the Rosh Yeshiva's wife. The fact of the matter is that when you hear, you know, the mitzvah Haftan Recha Kamocha applies to men and women, right? So the truth is on a certain level, your obligation to be friendly to another person applies regardless of their sex. Okay? The point is, on the other hand, you don't want to be promiscuous. The point is a lot of times...
Where's actual promiscuity, though?
No, that's not my point. My point is that you see people basically, you know, saying, I can't relate to that woman, even in terms of just doing a good deed, or even giving her a lift to school, or whatever it is, which are all concepts that come from Haftarech Gemocha, because sneas or whatever it is. Well, wait a second. That's not the only consideration. The consideration is to do a chesed. Consideration is to help someone out. So I went back to that case of the chesed shveita. Hey, yeah, it's a consideration. Woman's naked, it's over the. On the other hand, she's going to die. She's drowning. Go save her. I mean, forget. The fact is that there's much more other things. So I'm talking about talking. I'm not talking about not following halacha. I'm talking about understanding the complexity. The point is that on a certain level, you sit there and say, I'm never going to talk to a woman. Okay, therefore you're being machmir in the level of sneas. On the other hand, you've totally negated the mitzvah of Haftarech Kamocha. The point is, mitzvahs need balancing. It's an interesting thing from last week's parsha. If you look at the Ramban, in last week's parsha, he basically points out, it's a little bit more specific, and Rashi, the way people understand Rashi and Rashi's idea, and so forth and so forth, the two givings of the Torah, and especially you see that also in Rashi, and look at the commentaries on Rashi, Mizrahi, and so forth. The two presentations of the Aseret Dibrot, the differences in language, and so forth and so forth. The point is God gives us conflicting values at the same time. Okay? The fact is there's a dialectic within Torah, and the point is that you have to understand that you're not just given one value, you're giving another value. Like Rashi points, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to light a fire. On the other hand, you have to be makar for certain kabbanas. You have to bring certain sacrifices, which demands the lighting of a fire. So the point is that you got to know how to balance it. You got to balance it al pi halacha. So the point is that that's a consideration.
So
and that things are lost.
Halacha, you could find that halachas could go extreme, and then halachas can be
the fact is that becomes through study, analysis. It also comes through the fact of trying to find the methodology that you have to find for yourself. That's why I talk about living with questions.
Right. So let's say okay, but let's say we're in a hyper-sexualized world more than this. I don't know how it's more than the 70s, but apparently it is.
You know something? I don't know. The fact is the world goes through other things, but the point is that your issue. I'm not interested in the change of time. When people throw it, it's different because the world's different. The point of it is you live in this world.
Right.
The question is is recognizing what values you believe in,
right,
and understand those values, understand the halachic statements of those values, and understand that all these values are oftentimes in conflict with each other.
Right. So you have an example, you have a couple, a frum couple, who they were dating, and they gave into their sexual taboos, whatever that means. And then they get married, and the wife goes to the mikvah, and they have they have a good family, and they're frum, and they become probably frummer to some degree. Yeah. And no one looks back at the past as much.
Yeah, but what's the question?
I don't know. What do you?
What's the question? The point is, see, you're no. Wait a second.
They live with that, but they live with that, and
the fact is, so are you asking a tshuva question? How they live with tshuva? And then the fact is that
I just know it's a reality that people face, and it's something that.
No, but the fact is, you see, what you're doing, you're doing is saying, hey, people make mistakes and then they come out okay. Fine. So the point is, does that mean making the mistakes was a good thing? Mm-hmm. They themselves, a lot of Muslims, they say, I wish I never did that. Well, go talk to them about it. The point is that you're not finding the issue. The issue is what do I do now? What's the right thing for me to do?
Right.
It's not sitting there and saying, well, they made quote unquote mistakes, but it turned out okay. But the point of the matter is the way you're talking is they're not mistakes. You're talking that,
right,
hey, I can reach this objective, and it doesn't have to be this path. Yeah, there are people. There are people who will, like, for example. There are people who become frum even after they get married, and they'll talk about how their single lives and how promiscuous they were when they were single and this and this and that, and they'll talk as if, hey, I had the best of both worlds. Beforehand, I wasn't from, so it was fun and games. And then when I finally got married, we became from, and now it's
Fun and games.
I'm focused on a different type of fun and games. I'm focused on the family and so forth and so forth. And everyone says I sold my wild oats when I was a kid, so now it's great. The point of the matter is, it's very nice if you think that way. Okay, if you look at the Rambam's definition of tshuva, it's not tshuva. Tshuva has to have charata. Okay? If you sit there and say, regret, you have to sit there and say, I made a mistake, and you have to feel bad about it. You have to sit there and say, hey, this was not good. Okay, now the point is,
how do you get to feel bad? Like, how do you make yourself regret?
So therefore,
why should you be?
By the way, that's a question with tshuva. That's a question with tshuva. Everyone talks about what is tshuva. Look at the Rambam. See, the first step of tshuva is recognizing you did something bad, having charata. Okay? Now, does that mean you should, if you don't have charata, you shouldn't change your behavior? No, of course you should change your behavior. But in terms of the mitzvah of tshuva, you have to recognize it was wrong.
But if you do it, if you recognize it wrong, you try to do tshuva and then you do it again.
You're dealing. You're not dealing with the issue.
Right, I know, that's the problem.
No, because the problem is
Okay, what's the problem?
You're trying to make it more personal. You're trying to make it more psychological. You're not dealing with the ideas. The ideas is...
The ideas don't work, obviously.
No, the ideas is that working on the ideas. The point is that thinking through what's right and what's wrong. The point is, the case that I said is that the person who says, I had a good time and now I do this. Basically, that person is saying, that period of time this was okay, now this period of time is okay. But if you're going to do tshuva, you have to sit there and say, no, that was not okay. So why wasn't it okay?
Wait, I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
I just think, on like some sort of like Jewish guilt or whatever,
yeah.
Like I just think that sometimes it's not like part of our religion and everything, but that we kind of are like encouraged almost to like feel bad about ourselves.
No. You know something, that's exactly, that's perhaps a better answer to the question here. It's not about psychological guilt.
Okay.
It's about understanding the ideas. There's a difference between I feel bad, okay, I feel guilty, I wasn't a good person, so the fact versus understanding that you made a mistake through ideas. And the fact is that, hey, it's like driving a car, right? It's not that it's like I took a right turn when I shouldn't have, and now I learn not to take a right turn in that situation again. You know what I mean, or something like that.
Yeah.
And boy, I was, and making that right turn was a mistake. The fact is that charata, it's not about that emotion of guilt in a that psychological concept of guilt, and I feel bad. So
the hellfires are going to...
In fact, the idea is that what was the mistake, and why do you want to correct it? Okay? If you keep saying 1 + 1 = 3, you get up and say, gee, I feel guilty because in my test, I feel really bad in my test, I put 1 + 1 = 3. That's not a guilt trip. You sit there and say, I messed up my test. Yeah. I got and there were consequences to it. So now that's the idea. The person who says, I had a great time this and this, and now I don't have a great time or like this. Well, that's because you're seeing life a certain way. The point is, the halacha is saying this about sexuality, and the fact is that when you really understand it, then you sit there and say, gee, I messed up. I wish I wouldn't have done that. Okay? I wish I would have lived differently. I mean, the fact is that
if you look back and look at problems, how is that beneficial? Sometimes
if you know how to correct then you work towards correcting it.
Why not just start looking at everything as positive?
The fact is that when you see your mistakes, that's the place you can start knowing how to go forward from there.
But how do you do that without emotion?
It doesn't have to. It's not the It's not without the emotion. It's without the emotion that stifles you. You're too focused on the emotion.
Right.
You're sitting there and saying, people made mistakes and they turned out okay. It's not the issue. The point of the matter is you want to find out what was the mistake so I can correct it.
Right.
Okay? That guy made a mistake. He turned out okay. Great. I'm glad to hear that guy turned out okay. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to find why is it a mistake and what do I learn from this and how can I correct it.
Are these things actual problems? Like that, like
it depends.
mistakes in the first place?
That's part of the halachic analysis.
When you do a test and you don't do well,
so that's part of the.
You should,
that's part of
be happy you're okay, not let it bother you.
No. The fact of the matter is that sometimes, like for example, let's say you do a test, you don't do well, right?
Yeah.
One of the answers is that you shouldn't be taking that course. You know what I mean? Hey, this isn't for me. That's an answer
it's
also.
A bit too abstract.
I'm not saying that in terms of halacha. I'm trying to say.
Look for.
I'm trying to say.
Beneficial
thing. I'm trying to say. Here's okay. I got a 47 on this exam. Okay. Now, what am I going to do? Okay, this is not good. First of all, your definition of it not being good. Now, the point of the matter is first of all, you really feel it's not good. Okay, the fact is you might sit there, you might not have that idea. You might sit there and say, because that guy tells me it's not good. And a lot of times when it comes to certain things, people get all guilty because some other voice is telling them that it's bad, but they really don't feel that bad.
Yeah, but eventually, you think, oh, you're just not good enough. I'm not good enough for
No, that doesn't be eventually. That doesn't have to be the eventual. In other words, what I'm saying is that if you sit there and say, if a person is trying to do tshuva, right, because someone else keeps saying that's wrong, okay, and this person really doesn't feel it's wrong, but feels guilty because the other person keeps saying it's wrong, hasn't been incorporated the value. The value is not there. Right. It's not incorporated. It's some other's value that's on this periphery that's getting to you, but you really don't see what's wrong with it. You sit there and say, hey, in your own mind, you don't really see what's wrong. That's why you keep doing it, because you really don't see anything wrong with it. Right. Then it comes down to the situation when you say, gee whiz, this is wrong. This is not good. Well, why is it not good? So I gave an example of the test. As an example, there could be a lot of different reasons why it's not good. One of the reasons it's not good is because you didn't study right. One of the reasons is because you really don't like the material. One reason is because you shouldn't be in that course. There are a lot of different reasons.
I don't know. One reason I find, like for myself, it's like you don't know any better.
No. The fact of the matter is that already it's truth is you're already not thinking about what's wrong.
No, but like within the what's wrong process, like you could say, so you haven't experienced, like the ideal you haven't experienced. So how are you?
No, because we're talking ideals. We're talking ideas. You're talking ideas in the sense of
after this course and you're just not good at it, but it's the only thing you like to do. Let's say, or like that's something you could see yourself wanting to do.
That's something where you start working much more. There's much more self-introspection of yourself. Figure out what to do, what not to do. Those are tough questions.
How do you then proceed?
Those are tough questions on an individual basis. But what you're saying is things where it's staying on an emotional level. It's not getting to the root of it.
Like you said, okay. Like I'll give you an example. Like to be more specific. You said the idea of relationships that is loneliness, right? It's finding someone who completes that loneliness. So someone who does, I guess, the frequent hookups or whatever, gets themselves in these short-term relationships, doesn't benefit from the lack of loneliness. Probably feels it even more, but it was never in a serious relationship where they see the bigger picture of things.
No, the fact of the matter is, doesn't have to be never in a serious relationship. There are a lot of people who are lonely who've never been in a serious relationship. That's one of the reasons they're lonely. The point of the matter is that's in fact just not it. Not it. The point is that the starting point is a lot of times people hook up because they substitute fleeting experiences for what they really want, which is a deeper relationship.
Right.
So a lot of times you have people basically. There's an old movie called Looking for Mr. Goodbar. It's an old Diane Keaton movie where this woman was a teacher, and she basically went out to the bars every night to get picked up because she was extremely lonely. She had a lot of psychological angst and difficulties and so forth and so forth, and basically she took the one night stand as a substitute for any deep relationship. And the movie ends up with her being killed eventually. So it's obviously a very powerful statement. It's a very powerful statement about her own psychological issues. But her psychological issue was, but the argument was, is that she was substituting something that was not substantial. She was substituting something that was not substantial. It's like people who
wait, because she was just going after that, or wait, she really wanted a relationship.
The argument in the movie, it's not a real thing.
Right.
The argument in the movie is that she needed a real relationship, but she substituted her with something that was not a real substitution. And a lot of times that's what we do. The point is you have to understand it, and then you have to understand that it's like you're hungry. What you really need is a good meal, and you're eating candy.
The only thing available is candy.
Right. So you keep eating candy, and you find out you get sicker. But at first,
so you didn't have any food.
You're complicating the situation, and it's something to work through. But the fact of the matter is that you don't have any food, and you're also diabetic. So the point is that it can get to a situation where, wait a second, and you eat like this right now, and you sit there and say, well, it satisfied me for 3 minutes, but in the end, there'll be worse consequences from it. The truth is that when we make decisions in life, a lot of our life decisions have to do with this kind of complexity. It's not the matter of just working through an emotional feeling. Right. The emotions are there, but it's a matter, of thinking and saying, okay, what's wrong? Now, when you have a statement that's halachically wrong, halacha says this is wrong, what you first want to do is make sure, is that what halacha really says? Okay? And that's part of issues, and that's where it gets into questions of things like a selech harav, finding a rav that you trust, and you basically want to follow that perception in Torah, and so forth. A lot of times people will say very simplistic answers of what's right and wrong because they have their own agenda or whatever. But the point is that if you understand a broader perspective in terms of life and different issues and necessities and so forth, then you may sit there and say, okay, I just really see what the halacha is really saying. And if the halacha is saying something to you that you don't personally feel, then one of the issues is to say, I have to try and understand the halacha. Okay, so and the classic example of that is Avram Avinu by stone. When basically, when God says this is what I'm going to do, Avram says, how can you do that? What happens if there's 50 people or 50 tzaddikim and so forth? If God said this is what He's going to do, did Avram didn't think it would have been the right answer? Avram's questioning is not, hey God, maybe making a mistake here. God said, I'm going to do this. So therefore, Avram's asking these questions. It's not because he's going to catch God. It's because he's basically saying, listen, what you're doing is right. But what I have to understand is why it's right. That's my challenge.
Moshe did the same thing, but he changed
that's part of it also. So the fact is, Moshe Rabbeinu says, listen, God says A. Okay, you know the right answer is going to end up being A. The point is, I want to understand why it's A, and that's very much part of the issue.
But you can actually change Hashem's will with that.
No, that's something different.
Right.
And when you start talking about changing Hashem's will, you're getting into language you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, fine.
Okay, because what do you mean changing God's will? The fact of the matter is that what you've done is change circumstances. I mean, it's much more complex.
Okay.
But the point is that's what I'm saying. The simple Avram Avinu situation, where sometimes someone says A. You sit there and say, gee, I don't really understand why A is bad or A is good or something like that. Then becomes a dilemma trying to figure out why. If it's wrong to eat pork, I'd like to know why it's wrong to eat pork. What am I going to do in the meantime? Not eat pork, because God tells me it's wrong. Now I want to try and figure it out why.
So is that the faith aspects? If you can't find that answer,
then in the process,
you're fair chance to, if you can't find
the statement of Nasa V'Nishma, okay, is not just I'm going to do, which is the way most people think that Judaism is what I'm going to do. No, it's what I'm going to do and understand. My first step is I'm going to do, because you're telling me it's the right answer. So the right answer, the professor gives you a test. The right answer is A. You look at the question and say, gee, I don't really understand why the right answer is A. What should I do? Well, circle the A, give it in, and work to try to understand why A is the right answer. Okay? That's what Torah study is about.
Right.
Okay? But you can get thrown off by emotions of like you're talking in terms of guilt and so forth and so forth. It's not the emotional guilt. It's use your head. You know what I mean? And when you hear something's wrong, work it through. And charata is not, oh, I feel guilty. Charata is, okay, this is wrong. Now, why is it wrong? Why did I make a mistake? And you walk away by saying, gee, that was a mistake. Now I understand why it's a mistake.
You do that and then do it again. Does that mean you're correct?
Right. So I just put my hand. I just put my hand on an open flyer and so forth and so forth. Gee, I burned my whole hand. Pull it away. Gee, I'm going to do that again. Okay.
It's sad, but we do that.
So why do you do that? That's your new question.
Well, we're created, or we are people who forget. We forget. No, it's very true. We do something and then we forget and then we'll do it again.
Or it's a minor burn.
But not because we want to hurt ourselves again. We just don't realize.
That's true.
So why do you forget?
And I mean, it's a lot.
Guess what? There are a lot of children that they put their hand on a hot thing and they don't do it again. They don't forget. Okay.
Because you don't really see the income. You don't see the consequence as easily. Also.
Yeah.
That's also the other thing.
Now you're.
That's not true.
Now you're.
There you go.
Now you're understanding what death is in life. Do you understand? This is what learning is about.
We don't know the punishment. It's not in front of us.
This is what you're right. So this is the process. It's tough. It's difficult. This is part of the process. What you're doing is saying to me, gee, this is problematic. We don't always see the answers. We don't see. Yeah, that's correct. So now you understand what the process should be about. The thing I get upset about is when people throw out simplistic answers, they stop individuals from really living the process. So everyone sits there and says, here's the answer, and they think they're helping you out by giving you the answer.
That's why a lot of atheists are atheists, because of the.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is that I've seen in my life, I've seen people basically, okay, the reason that they're not even giving it a chance anymore is thinking through Torah is because someone gave them a stupid answer, and they really said, okay. I mean, how many times have I had to sit there and say, and show people, and sit there and say, okay, well that was a stupid answer. And people go, aren't you Orthodox? I said, aren't you Orthodox? I said, yes, I'm Orthodox. Well, this is what the Orthodox say. No, that was a stupid answer that someone who called himself Orthodox gave you. It was stupid. I mean, the fact is that, I mean, but the word stupid is even too simple. It's not a way. It's simple answers.
Sometimes I've seen people go to a Rav like in the community, and they'll give you just a simple answer, and they have much more going on that they
Yes.
don't realize.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then they just, okay, this is a big rub that I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
you know, that's the best
Yeah.
you can give me, then I'm.
You know something. One thing you should know. You know, a lot of times about, let's say, learning Torah. When you go to a big Rav and ask him questions about learning Torah and what do you do to get involved in learning Torah and so forth and so forth, ask him about his interest in learning. So you find out that at the age of 6, he was already, you know, he loved to read. He was reading through all the Mishnayos and so forth and so forth. By the time he was, you know, 13, he already finished Shas. He just loved learning and so forth and so forth. Right? Okay. And yeah. So the fact of the matter is that you go up to him and say, you know, I'm not into learning. Which way? Well, you just learn. You'll see. Wait a second. That's not the person who's going to give you an answer because he never had any challenges.
Right.
Right? Okay? The point of the matter is, he might be smart enough to have an answer for you.
Yeah.
He might have said, listen, I know how to answer it for people who don't have my psychological makeup and so forth and so forth. But the fact is a lot of times, you gotta know, like, hey, listen, what's going on over here? And it has a lot to do with who you are and the answers you're given. A lot of people give simple answers, and you find out that that worked in their own lives. It doesn't work in everyone's lives.
It brings to mind a point. You know, we're arguing about whether the Torah has a solution to every problem that people have, whether it's mental or psychological. That, like Alex is saying, like sometimes it's like someone who went off the derech, maybe he had bigger issues than religion, and I was saying I was maybe arguing that, like, you know, like if you learn Torah, the only day you learn Torah, how can you be unhappy? Is it possible to be depressed if you learn Torah?
You know something. The fact is that it's a psychological question. You know. Right. I mean that's the whole part
Warren
of it.
was trying to say that Torah is answer to everything. That somebody who learns Kol Torah, who learns daily, every single day, all Torah, if he's manic depressive, won't be depressed.
Okay. You know,
I have to go with that.
But the point is that the work is not on your shoulders. The work is in trying to understand the depth of the questions and trying to understand the challenge of the questions. It's not going to be found. It's not going to be found.
But you want to get the answer.
So work at it.
But if you don't get sometimes you just...
You're not going to get the answer by sitting there and saying, "Well, I've seen people turn out okay like this." That's
okay,
not the problem.
But if you do work it, but like it even says like I think Rabbi says there are paradoxes. There are things that you just can't get the answer to. Okay. But you can get more of an understanding of the mechanics behind it to so appreciate it more.
Right, exactly.
Rabbi says you get a glimpse.
Right.
You get glimpses.
Okay. So the fact is that's what life is about.
There's I don't remember him speaking about it, but there was a specific question about, like, in the Torah, finding, like, you can find it in maths and sciences and all the, like, you know, all these things, and then the other person was saying, do you know what, like, they say about, like, female genitalia in there? It's like makes it sound like something crazy, and, like, according to the Gemara, and, like, that was where the argument went. So, like, what do you say about that? People miss quote all the time.
I mean, the fact is that that's
getting. The guy that learned in yeshiva, but, like, then he became, like, basically atheist.
Well, the fact of the matter is just whether the Gemara. I mean, the point is the Gemara is not a science book. The fact of the matter is that when the Gemara makes certain statements, where did the Gemara get it from? I mean, that was the whole issue with the whole thing with whole issue with Rabbi Slifkin and stuff like that. There's statements in the Gemara that are contrary to what we know from science today. The fact is because Chazal was you know, the same way that a person asks a shaila to a posek, he's going to go ask if a person asks a medical question, the posek will go talk to a doctor, get the medical information, and then pass it. So Chazal did the same thing. They went to ask the medical what the doctors there told them.